But it's a real tough job when you've got somebody who's cursing at you, or and you're trying to maintain your professionalism when they're saying some really bad things to you. Yet that's our job. You're supposed to have tough skin. We have to expect that in our careers, that not everybody's going to like us, you know. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we deal with people, it's in a negative light. Somebody's getting a traffic ticket, somebody's getting stopped by the police, somebody's going to jail. So that's why you're seeing so much being done in communities and going around and talking to people like me being here. It's a part of community policing, you know. A lot of you may have seen me before, but may have never spoke to me. So you're like, I don't know, is he smart? Is he dumb? Is he a power hungry guy? Is he, you know, and so being part of the community, getting out and talking to people, that's where you develop that trust. You know that they're professional, and when you ask them to do something and investigate something, you know it's going to be done right.
Okay, in the book Dear Martin, by Nick Stone, a 17-year-old black boy was trying to get an old oh sorry was trying to help get an old friend home because she had gotten drunk. He was doing the right thing, but a white police officer showed up and kept him in handcuffs for hours. Is there a rule to keeping someone in handcuffs? What's policy and procedure for that?
Yeah, there's number one, you know, there's a lot of times when you have extreme times like that and it's unnecessary. I mean, it could be considered a false arrest when somebody is being detained for that period of time and it was unwarranted. There would have to be a number of facts to support that. Like, let's say, for example, they find the girl unconscious and maybe she was just drinking on her own and he was just taking her home. But she's not able to say that. She is completely out of it. Now, you're not just going to let this guy walk, right? Because what if he did something to her? So you're going to try to ascertain the most information you can from the situation, but you can do so courteously, professionally, and trying to obtain the facts without, obviously, in the book, this officer you said was he using racial slurs as well? There's no room for that in policing. And the bottom line is, in our particular case, things would be on camera. If it wasn't, that would be a whole nother issue because they're required to have that on. And it automatically comes on. The only way it wouldn't record is if you're stopping it, you know, or if the camera actually broke or something. So somebody would be facing some very, very serious disciplinary issues and possible termination from their job. And not only that, but they could end up having a civil rights lawsuit filed against them. And that doesn't just affect them, that goes straight up to the top. If one of my guys is out there doing something, I'm probably going to be the one to lose my job. If you guys remember during the Rodney King incident, I'm sure you've seen something in the news from a long time ago. Remember that? In Los Angeles, California, a black man was struck multiple times with a baton, and a gentleman was standing off to the side with a video camera. Video cameras weren't real popular. They became popular after that, but the whole thing was on video. You had the police officers were all acquitted, found not guilty, but then they turned around and filed a civil rights lawsuit, took them into civil court, and these guys were found guilty of that, of actually discrimination and excessive use of force and things like that. So, you know, when it comes to situations like that, there's a lot of accountability by having the video cameras. And we do have requirements that they treat people with respect. And in that particular case, detaining someone for an unreasonable amount of time, I mean, obviously she was able to talk and things like that, and he wasn't listening to anything. He was focused on one thing. There's no room for that in today's policing. Somebody like that probably shouldn't be a police officer.
In the book we were reading in class, the police officer makes an arrest based on his assumptions rather than investigating the situation. Why would an officer have to make an assumption, and how often do police make assumptions?
Well, I think, you know, obviously all police officers have to have some sort of an assumption. We're assuming that something is going on. But before you make an arrest, you better have probable cause. And probable cause to believe that a crime has been, or is about to be committed. Those are the requirements for probable cause. So you have to have more than just a hunch. I can feel that, they're up to something. But if I can't put my finger on it and I can't make an arrest based on that, that would be a false arrest. So we have to have more than just an assumption. But an assumption's what starts off the investigation, but then it's your duty to go in and fill in the facts.
So now we've got a few career questions,
Mhm.
just about. So let's see.
What training do you have to go through?
Well, a lot of police departments nowadays are requiring college or some college. Some still do not. They just require a high school diploma. But what happens is somebody gets hired, is going through the process with our department, they'll go through several interviews. Then we do a very thorough background check. And the background check could be previous employers, schools, friends. And then once it's determined that they pass that, they could have to go through a psychological test, which takes like 6 hours. We've been going up to Chicago to take psychological test to make sure that person is mentally sound and fit to do the job. And then a lot of departments require polygraph examinations, which is a lie detector test. And they try to determine whether or not the subject is truthful. After that is done, now the academy just increased by 2 weeks, so it's up to 14 weeks long. They will have to go report on a Sunday night, and they wouldn't come home till Friday night, and then they would repeat that process again. For state police, it's approximately 6 months long in the academy. Once they have successfully passed and learned all of the things about being a police officer, then they would return back to the departments, and then they would have what they call a FTO, a Field Training Officer Program, where they're being mentored by multiple officers who are trained to train a new police officer in the various aspects and applications of what they learned throughout the academy. They're constantly being evaluated by this, and there's a lot of people who don't, even though you went to the academy and even though you could have been a straight A student in the academy, and then you get back and you can't do the job, they don't feel that you're the right fit. You could be let go. So that's just the initial training. After that, there's continuous training we have to do. There's annual training that's required by the state, by the Illinois Training and Standards Board, and we have to prove that we send our officers by certificates. And a lot of these classes are available through them online, but there's additional classes as well.
A lie detector is 100% accurate?
No, they're not. No, they're not able to be used in court, but a lot of times they'll use them to eliminate a suspect. So if somebody is very vocal, I didn't do this, and they say, would you take a polygraph? They say, yeah, and they take it. If they pass that polygraph, there's a good chance that they can move on to another suspect, but they're not 100% accurate. That's why they're not allowed in court. But for employment purposes, they do use them. Another thing that they look at a lot of times, they were for a while, was looking at social media and getting their permission to get on their Facebook or get on their Twitter account and see what they're posting, what types of pictures. And a lot of times you'll get younger people who are just out of college, showing themselves at parties, doing some things they shouldn't be doing, and it ends up eliminating them.
What do you guys do on a regular day?
On a regular day? Well, everybody's different and every department's different. With me being the chief of police here, I have a lot of paperwork, a lot of requirements that I have to do. I have to approve reports that from the guys doing the other shifts. In addition, I'm the only one on duty, even though I'm the chief of police, so I have to respond to calls. So, in addition to the regular duty of the administrative functions and dealing with budgets and policies and things like that, evaluation of my employees on a biannual and annual basis, and I'm always constantly looking at ways to improve the agency, for us to be more efficient. A lot of police officers like that work the evening and night shift, they have responsibilities of, locking and unlocking the Centennial Park, maybe the bathrooms, and keeping an eye on the park downtown. They have business checks they're required to do, so many business checks, and they're required to do, and that would include like liquor checks, going into bars, walking in, and it's that serves several purposes. First of all, it puts him out there in the community. He's out there talking, people get to know him. Secondly, if anybody is underage drinking, and frequenting these places, then we're going to be onto that real quick. So if they see somebody who appears to be underage, they may ask for an identification to verify their age. The other thing it does is whenever you have a police officer walking into a bar and there's people drinking in there, anybody in there, hopefully, that's had a little bit too much to drink, might think twice about leaving, thinking, oh, cops been in here, they've seen me, I probably shouldn't drive. And if you're thinking I probably shouldn't drive, you probably shouldn't drive, We're about prevention. We're not going in there looking who can we stop later. My goal has always been, if you see somebody walking out to their car and they're dropping their keys, don't wait for them to get in it and drive off, because in my opinion, if they end up leaving and you light them up with emergency lights and they flee from you and they T-bone a family in a bad car accident, that liability, I don't want to come back on me and be asked, well, could have you stopped them before they left? I want our guys to go up and if they saw somebody staggering down a sidewalk and dropping their keys and trying to get in a driver's seat of a car, or a driver's door of a car, I would want them to approach them and say, hey, you have anybody you can call? If it's local, give them a ride. If it's not local, see if you can get somebody to take them. But definitely make the warning there. If you get in that car and you put that keys in the ignition, I'm going to arrest you for DUI. And everybody knows who's got a driver's license. It's a very, very expensive thing. Not only do you have to pay for attorneys, and not only do you have to pay for fines and court costs, and you have higher rates of insurance going up for probably the next 10 years. It could be a very, very costly thing. So that's some of the things that we do with that. And so the police officers, they have those to do, plus they're answering calls, and they have to put together a report in chronological order, and put all the information in on the individuals there. They have to get written statements, recorded interviews. There's a number of things that they have to do, but everybody's trained to do it, and everybody does a pretty decent job here with it.
How do you know when to make an arrest?
Well, a lot of times it's, we do have discretion. We don't have to arrest everybody. If I see somebody turn in front of me and they don't have their turn signal on, could I write them a ticket? Could I? For not using their signal? Yeah, absolutely. But do I want to go out there and write everybody tickets for not turning their turn signal on? I would rather talk to somebody and say, hey, you need to see them in this. Hey, you start using your turn signal. You turned the other day in front of me and you didn't have. I'd rather do something like that. Now, if that's an indication along with other things, like let's say somebody's driving over the center of the roadway, that could be an intoxicated motorist. It could be an elderly person with health issues. We've had people we've stopped before that were diabetic, and they were suffering from like hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, or hyperglycemia, too much, too high blood sugar. So there's been medical issues that have backed that up. If I'm going to arrest somebody, I have to have probable cause. I have to know the elements of the offense for which the crime occurred, and so there's certain criteria there. If there's a law being broken, there's certain elements that have to be reached in each of those offenses. And I have to be aware of those, because if it doesn't meet the elements of the offense, I can't charge him with that crime. So once that's been determined, then an arrest is deemed to be the way to go. We can do that. We don't always have to arrest. Sometimes we can just write them a citation. Sometimes we can just give them an I bond, an individual bond, and it has the court date on and all their information on it, and then they'll be sent a notice to go to court at a later date. That way we avoid having to take them up, and they have to post bond and go through fingerprinting and all that. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody steals a can of soda pop or something, or beer up at one of the local stores, and I arrest them. And I come up, I confront them, they admit to it, I've got the pop on them, they didn't pay for it, they didn't have any money, and it's a mother, and she's got her little kid in the car. Well, I could do one, she's not from out of town, she's just passing through town, so she's got this 3-year-old kid in the car. Do I want to put mom in handcuffs and take her all the way to the jail? I'm going to have to call DCFS to come and get the child, or somebody else, a family member, and if she's from out of state or something. So in those particular circumstances, it might be better just to give her a notice to appear in court. And if she doesn't appear, then they'll issue a warrant for her arrest.